For 15 years, one man camped inside Italy, beat every army Rome sent at him, and never lost a battle worth the name. He is still studied at every war college on earth. Rome never produced his equal, and he lost. Completely. The city he fought for was erased from the world. Hidden inside this story is a lesson we still get wrong today. What is it? Hi, this is What is the Lesson? The channel where we take one old story and pull out the one lesson we still get wrong today. Today's story, Hannibal. By the end, you'll know exactly why the greatest winner in military history lost everything. Let's begin. In 237 BC, in a temple in North Africa, a boy of 9 was made to put his hand on an altar. His father was Hamilcar Barca, and Hamilcar had just lost a war. For 23 years, Carthage had fought Rome for the island of Sicily, and for 23 years it had bled. Carthage lost. It surrendered Sicily, paid an indemnity that broke its treasury, and learned what Roman terms felt like. Hamilcar had never been beaten in the field. He had been beaten by the peace, so he asked his son whether he wanted to come with him to Spain. The boy said yes. Then, the historians tell us, Hamilcar made him swear an oath that he would never be a friend to Rome. Whether those were the words, we cannot know. But the man that child became spent every year of his life keeping them. Hamilcar went to Spain to build the thing Carthage had lost. An empire that paid for an army. And in the middle of it, a boy growing up inside an army. In the tents, on the marches, at the councils. He learned Greek. He learned Iberian. He learned how a Numidian horseman thinks and how a Roman one does not. Hamilcar drowned in a river crossing. His son-in-law took the command and was assassinated 8 years later. In 221 BC, the army chose its own commander. They chose the 26-year-old who had grown up among them. The historians who hated him still recorded that he ate what his soldiers ate and slept on the ground wrapped in a cloak among the sentries. Rome was watching Gaul and the Adriatic and its own politics. It was not watching Spain. There was a treaty line in Spain. On the Roman side of it stood a hill town called Saguntum. Hannibal besieged it. Rome sent envoys telling him to stop. He did not stop. After 8 months, the town fell. Rome demanded that Carthage hand him over. In the Carthaginian Senate, a Roman ambassador gathered a fold of his toga and said he carried peace and war in it, and Carthage could choose. Carthage told him to choose for them. He let the fold drop and said, "Then take war." Rome expected the war to be fought in Spain or in Africa. It planned for both. It did not plan for Italy. In the spring of 218 BC, Hannibal left Spain with roughly 90,000 men and headed north, overland. He crossed the Pyrenees. He crossed the Rhone, floating his elephants over on earthed-over rafts. And then he did the thing nobody believed an army could do. He went into the Alps in October. Hostile tribes rolled boulders down onto the column. Pack animals went off the path in the dark. There was a place where the track had gone, and the army stopped, and the snow kept coming. The old story says he showed them Italy from the summit, the plains below, and everything they had come for. He came down into Italy 15 days later, with perhaps 26,000 men. He had lost more than half his army before meeting a single legion. Most of the elephants died that winter. The crossing is one of the great feats in military history, and it cost him everything he could not replace. Rome sent an army to end it quickly. At the river Trebia in December, Hannibal let them come. The next spring, he marched through a flooded marsh of 4 days to get around the next Roman army. He lost the sight in one eye doing it. At Lake Trasimene, he hid an entire army in the fog along the shore road and let a Roman column march into it. 15,000 Romans died in 3 hours. It remains the largest ambush ever successfully carried out. Rome had now lost 2 armies in 8 months to a man it had not expected to see for another year. So in 216 BC, Rome did what Rome always did. It raised a bigger army. 80,000 men. The largest force Rome had yet put in one field. They found him near a village called Cannae. Hannibal had about 50,000. He arranged them in a shallow curve, bulging out toward the Romans with his weakest troops at the center. The Romans hit the bulge and pushed. It gave. They pushed harder, and it kept giving. That was the plan. The center was designed to bend without breaking, and it was drawing 80,000 men into a bag. His African veterans, held back on both wings, turned inward. His cavalry destroyed the Roman horse and came in from behind. The largest army Rome had ever fielded was surrounded on an open plain by a smaller one, and it could not move its arms. The sources give figures between 50 and 70,000 Roman dead in a single day. Whatever the true number, it was catastrophic. Cannae is the double envelopment. Every general since has tried to repeat it, and almost nobody has. In one afternoon, Hannibal had killed a substantial share of Rome's governing class. Southern Italy began to change sides. That night, his cavalry commander, Hannibal, told him to march. In 5 days, he said, you can dine on the capital. Hannibal said he needed time to consider it. And Hannibal said the line that has followed him for 2,000 years. You know how to win a victory, Hannibal. You do not know how to use one. It is not a fair line. Hannibal had no siege train, no fleet, and no reinforcements. Rome's walls were enormous. Its manpower reserves were intact. And his own army had just fought the hardest day of its life. His actual strategy was to break Rome's alliances, not its gates. To make Italy leave Rome rather than storm it. It was a reasonable strategy. It was also the moment the war stopped being about battles. And Hannibal had only ever been unbeatable at battles. To understand why Hannibal lost, you have to look at what Rome did in the weeks after Cannae. 8,000 Roman soldiers had been taken alive. Hannibal offered to sell them back at a reasonable price. The Senate debated it and refused. Not because it lacked the money, because paying would admit there was something to negotiate. They would not receive his peace envoy either. He was turned back before he reached the city. They limited public mourning by decree, so the city could keep functioning while it buried a generation. They armed 8,000 slaves and promised them freedom. They melted temple treasures to pay for it. And they met the consul, who had just lost 50,000 men on the road home, and thanked him publicly for not despairing of the Republic. That is not courage. That is a society that has decided in advance it does not lose. And then it stopped giving him battles. Fabius shadowed him at a distance, cut his foragers, burned the ground ahead of him, and refused every offer of a fight. It was the only strategy that worked. You cannot lose a battle you decline to fight. And it turned the war into the one contest Hannibal could not win. A long, grinding argument about resources. Rome could lose 50,000 men and field another army the next year. Hannibal could not replace 5,000. Every victory he won made his army smaller. Every defeat Rome took made it angrier. He asked home for reinforcements. Carthage was not sure it wanted to pay for them. The Barca family had enemies in that chamber, and the merchant families who ran the city preferred trade to a long war in Italy. So the greatest army commander alive spent 15 years in Italy on what he could carry, capture, or persuade. His brother Hasdrubal finally brought an army over the Alps to join him. Rome intercepted it first. The Romans rode to Hannibal's camp and threw his brother's head over the palisade. He is said to have looked at it and said that he saw the fate of Carthage. While Hannibal held Italy, a young Roman named Scipio took Spain away from Carthage entirely. Then he did the thing Hannibal never could. He took the war to the enemy's home city. Carthage, which had refused to fund the war in Italy, now recalled Hannibal to defend the city itself. He had been in Italy for 16 years. He left undefeated, and he left with nothing. At Zama in 202 BC, the two men met on the field, and the sources say, spoke first. Neither would give ground. Scipio had learned the lesson exactly. He beat Hannibal with Hannibal's own arrangement. Superior cavalry driven off, then brought back into the rear. Hannibal lost his only decisive battle at the age of 45, in front of his own city. Carthage surrendered. It gave up its fleet, its empire, and its right to make war without Rome's permission. Then Hannibal did something nobody expected. He went into politics, and he was good at it. The families he exposed reported him to Rome as a threat. Rome demanded him. He left rather than let the city be forced to choose. In about 183 BC, in a house in Bithynia, he found the exits watched by soldiers. He had carried poison in a ring for years. He is said to have remarked that Rome had grown tired of waiting for an old man to die. 40 years later, Rome went back to Carthage and finished what the treaty had started. The city was destroyed. So, what is the lesson? Here it is in one line. Rome could afford to lose. Hannibal could not afford to win. Hannibal was the better commander. That is not in dispute, and it was never the question. Every battle he won made his position weaker, because every battle cost him veterans he could not replace. Rome lost far more men and never noticed, because Rome had built something underneath the fighting: allies, manpower, and the patience to keep raising armies. He kept winning the argument. They kept owning the table. And notice the moment this story shows him at his best. It is not canny, it is the audit. The one time he addressed the system instead of the battlefield, he fixed in a year what his victories never could. We do this constantly. The brilliant hire who wins every meeting while the team quietly stops bringing them problems. The argument you win completely at home that costs you the thing the argument was supposed to protect. Being the best in the room is a tactic. It is not a plan. Rome could afford to lose, and Hannibal could not afford to win. Thanks for watching. If this story made you think, subscribe, like, and leave a comment below. And watch more of our stories right here, including another man who won every fight and still lost everything. See you in the next lesson.